Hey, what's going on everybody? I recently had a subscriber ask me to make a video about how to do frontside and backside 50/50s on round rails. I thought this was a really good video because if you've noticed, a lot of more experienced skaters, they say that they prefer to skate round rails, but if you just started skating, you've probably tried to like hop onto a round rail and you slip off and you might have fallen, and now every time you try to skate a round rail, you're kind of scared and you don't really know what to do because you can do 50/50s or any of your other tricks on a square rail or a ledge, but every time you try it on a round rail, you like slip off. And this is extremely common. So I thought I would make a video talking about 50/50s on round rails. I'm also going to cover 5-0s, and I'm going to kind of give you guys a checklist of what you need to do to skate round rail. The first thing that I want to address in this video is a lot of people talk about how you need to lock into the rail a certain way on 50/50s, and I think that this is a little bit ridiculous if you're just learning, because some people say you need to lock in heel side, which your heel's over the rail. Some people say toe side. Some people say you need to lock in crossways, which is where your heel is locked over the rail and then your toe is locked in, and this is called a cross lock. And even though this is very valid, when you're first learning, if you're trying to aim a particular part of your board onto a 50/50, like it's just gonna make you mess up like more. So this is something that you should disregard in the beginning. And I'm gonna give you 3 kind of rules to skating round rails. And if you follow these rules, it does not matter how you lock in. I actually filmed some clips of me locking in toe side, which is a frontside 50/50 over your toes, which is probably like the least favorable way to lock into a rail. But I followed my 3 rules and I landed it anyways. You can essentially lock over your trucks anyway if you follow these 3 rules and you're not gonna fall. And then after you kind of get the feeling of rails, then you can worry about how you want to lock in. Rule 1, whenever you're skating around a rail, and we're specifically talking about 50/50s right now because 50/50 is like the foundation to all your tricks. You kind of want to approach most tricks like a 50/50. So whenever you're doing a 50/50 on a round rail, it is extremely important to cut the angle into the rail as low as possible. When people first learn like frontside 50/50s on ledges, they come in at like an angle, so they're almost like doing a 90-degree ollie into the ledge. It just feels natural. But whenever you're jumping onto a round rail, and 50/50s in general, you want to come as parallel as possible. You obviously can't come in perfectly parallel because then you'd be like doing a jump over ollie and that's bad, but you want to have your angle as low as possible so that you can land really straight on the rail. If you come in at an angle to a circular bar, you're just gonna roll off the side. So rule number 1, make sure you try to come into the rail as parallel as possible. Take the smallest angle possible to jump onto that 50/50. Okay, rule number 2. Now this is super important, okay? So if you're jumping onto a 50/50 on a ledge or a flat bar, you don't really think about this, you just jump on it, okay? And when you're a beginner or you're learning skating, you're generally a little bit stiff. I always say like skateboarding is like relaxed strength. So you want to have a really relaxed, loose body, but you want to be strong when you need to be strong. So when you're coming onto the 50/50, you want to land on that rail like a feather, okay? So like, you know, some skaters when they skate flat ground or whatever, they do a trick and they slam it into the ground. You do not want to do that. You want to do the opposite. You want to pop up onto the rail, and then right before you hit that rail, you want to just loosen your body up and you want to try to land soft on the rail, like really absorb all of that impact in your ankles and your knees and bend down low. Because if you're jumping up and landing hard on a circle, you're just gonna roll off to the left or roll off to the right. You want that impact onto the rail to be as light as possible, okay? You wanna jump on it like a graceful little, I don't know, like a bunny or a grasshopper or whatever. You wanna just make sure that you land like a feather on top of that rail. Rule number 3 for skating round rails, specifically backside, frontside 50/50s, is this is probably the most important thing. All right, so you gotta think about this. We're on a round rail, okay? So when you get on top of that rail, you want to be centered above the rail. You hear a lot of skaters say like, maybe with like frontside crooked grinds or crooked grinds, are like, get on top of it. You want to be standing straight up on top of the rail. So like if you're on this round rail and here's your body weight and you're leaning off at an angle, you're just gonna slip off. Or if you get on top of it and you lean over this way, you're just gonna roll off. So when you ollie on top of that, make sure you're standing, like line yourself up like nice and on top of it. And if you're on top of it, you know, you can even maybe come in at a little bit of an angle. You can land kind of hard on it because if you're directly vertically on top of the rail, you're going to be centered. The biggest problem is I see like people get on a 50-50 and they're leaning like on the inside or the outside. They land and they just slip off. So standing up directly on top of the rail is absolutely crucial so that you can lock into that 50-50 and just grind the whole rail. Now that I went over like the 3 golden rules of skating round rails, I'm gonna kind of talk about why worrying about how you lock your truck in doesn't really matter. If you come into the rail at a very, very slight angle, nice and parallel, you ollie up and you land on that rail very lightly and you are completely on top of it and you are centered above the rail, if you land with your trucks locked in, like exactly in the middle of the round bar, like this, what's gonna happen is, like, this is a round rail, and according to physics, like, there's not a singular point of like the round rail and another point in space, like, because it's round. So, and you can't be perfect. Like, you're never gonna have like that perfect vertical alignment. You're never gonna come in at like a perfect parallel angle, because if you're coming in parallel, you have to hop over. So you do want a slight angle. If you're centered above the rail and you don't land hard, what's gonna happen is your board is just gonna naturally lock into your heel side or your toe side, or you're gonna cross your trucks. It's just gonna happen. That's why you don't need to think about it when you first start, because it's just gonna mess you up. You just need to line yourself up. And I have clips that I'm gonna roll of me like locking in either which way, and I just grind to the end, no problem. So as long as you're lined up, you land light on the rail, your board is gonna do what it wants to do. And that's how you're gonna build up the confidence of just like hopping on a rail whenever you want to. So that's why locking in a specific way doesn't matter. But after you get really comfortable with 50-50s, it's okay to line yourself up in a certain way, because like landing right on your heel side is like, you have to be within an inch. And when you're a beginner, that's hard. You want to line up just in the middle of the trucks, and it's going to happen. But once you get that comfortability, if you're doing a frontside 50-50, the most common like accepted way is to lock in over both of your heels. So you can kind of aim it to land over the top of your heels, but make sure you're still centered on the rail, because if you have that centered approach down and then you kind of like lean over your heels, you can fall off the corner of the rail. So make sure everything's still centered, but you can slightly aim to be over your heels. Now, the toe side pinch, some people like to do it, but I think it's commonly accepted that grinding over your toes on like a frontside or backside 50-50 is probably like the least favorable. And that's because your ankle bends like this, so there's like more room for air for you to get like funky on the rail. So I'd recommend, if you're doing a frontside 50-50, grind over your heels. And for the backside 50-50, it's commonly accepted to do what they call a cross lock. And you're naturally probably gonna go into a cross lock because it's backside, so your shoulder's gonna open up a little bit. And that's where you lock in on your heel side for the back truck, and your front truck is locked in over the toe. So the rail's straight, your board is slightly twisted, and that's gonna give you like the best balance point to do a backside 50-50. Now that you're super comfortable with 50-50s, let's talk about crooked grinds and 5-0s. Now, crooked grinds are a lot more straightforward. You really wanna lock in. If it's a frontside crooked grind, you want to lock in over your toe. And if it's a backside crooked grind, you want to lock in over your heel. This is like, you can't really do a crooked grind the other way. Like, maybe you can, it's not going to look good. You're not going to be able to sit on it as long. But the 3 like golden rules of skating round rails are totally valid here. Like, land light on the rail, and you want to be completely centered, straight up and down, completely on top of that rail, especially with like a front crook. If you're leaning either which way, it's just not gonna work. You wanna be completely on top of that rail. With the backside crooked grind, it's the same thing. You wanna be completely aligned over that front foot, and you should be fine. But now let's talk about the 5-0. The 5-0 is probably one of the most feared, disliked tricks on round rails. I actually love 5-0s. Like, I really like kickflip back 5-0s and kickflip front 5-0s on round rails, just because it is a little funky. And even if you're really experienced, you can still kind of like miss and roll over, and that's why I like it. It's just fun. So whenever you're doing a backside 5-0, you want to be locked in over that heel side. Okay, and if you're doing a frontside 5-0, you want to be locked in over the heel side as well. But, okay, I'm going to say it again. If you try, especially with a 5-0, if you try to aim for that heel side, you're going to miss. Okay, so what works for me is I think about lining it up just like a 50-50. I come in just like a frontside 50-50 and a backside 50-50. I don't even think about like how my truck's gonna go. I just ollie up and I try to be like perfectly aligned above the rail. And then right when I lock into the rail, I try to just land nice and like feather footed, nice and light on the rail and completely on top of it. And this is what I do to kind of tweak my board in that direction, which, you know, by default puts you on your heel side, is when I'm doing backside 5-0, right before I land down on that rail, I just kind of like open up my shoulder and it's gonna slightly turn me. And then I usually can just sit on it and it's super comfortable. And I do the same thing with the frontside 5-0, but you have to be careful with the frontside 5-0 because if you kind of try to open your shoulder as you're ollieing into it, you're gonna miss like bad, okay? And it's not pretty. So you wanna keep your shoulders straight with the rail, nice and parallel. You pop up, all the rules apply, stay centered, stay right on top of it, be light-footed, and then when you come down on the rail, you can kind of open your shoulder up and you should lock into the frontside 5-0 perfect. I really hope this helped because I actually haven't seen a video that talks about this. A lot of people like to go over like how to lock in, and I think that's nonsense. You only want to worry about cross locks and heel locks and toe locks after you're comfortable. Because if you're thinking about that, you're just gonna miss the rail and like fall really hard. If you like this video, please give me a comment, a like, and a subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.